So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Pastor Irvin Wasswa is the campus pastor at Living Hope Baptist Church in Clarksville, Tennessee. But Irvin is also a former UTA BSM student. He sat where you sat. He was one of our Tuesday night small group leaders back in the day. He took a lot of naps on those couches right back over there. When he left UTA, he moved to Louisiana and ended up at New Orleans Seminary. And then the last few years, he's been in Tennessee on staff at a church. And so I did bring a picture of Irvin to prove that he was here, and he did participate in Jar Wars. And so he both was in the Jar Wars auction, and then he had to go down the slide. So Irvin is he loves Jesus with all his heart. He took a strong stand for Christ as a student here. But since then, he's grown into a man of God and is a great Bible teacher. And so would you guys give Irvin a warm vertical welcome?
Appreciate it, Gary. Appreciate it. Oh, almost tripped there. Y'all didn't see that? Ooh, getting old, man. I can't, after a while. Hey, y'all doing all right tonight? Y'all good? Yeah. Good. Appreciate the intro, Brother Gary. As he said, my name's Irvin Wasswa. I grew up not too far from here in Cedar Hill, Texas. That's where I'm from, and then ended up coming to UTA here, spending 2 years here, and then transferring schools to Louisiana and finishing up there. But I tell you what, this place in particular is special. It's not just because of the many naps that I took on some of those couches over there. It's not because of all the free food that got to have while I was here, but because of men like Gary and guys like Ben Muir, who was finishing up, as I was starting, Jared Jackson, some of those guys are in the back there, folks that really invested in me and my friends and the friends that I've made while being here. I mean, it was a special time. And so I want to echo that and share that with you. I had a ton of nostalgia walking around today thinking, man, the good old days. And so if you got a Bible, turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 6. Nehemiah chapter 6 is where we're going to be in. I entitled this sermon that, I want to talk, and it's called this, Don't Quit, Keep Going. Don't quit, keep going. I remember when I was in graduate school, one of my first semesters there was taking a lot of hours, but I was killing it. I was rocking it. I mean, getting good grades on my tests, all these different things. And I remember one class in particular, one of my favorite classes that I loved. I was doing real well in there. And with about 3 weeks left, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to coast a little bit. I'm going to focus on some of my other classes, and I'm going to coast in this one, because, I know all the material, it's all good. I'm good to go. So I decided to kind of coast, didn't take on any of the extra credit, opportunities that were there. Ended up getting, like a low B, on one of the tests, and then, took a final and, and got my grade back there. And I ended up finishing with a 92, which on the 7-point scale, which is dumb, by the way. I hope are y'all still on 10-point scale here? UTA, do y'all know? Y'all may not even know. Anyways, 7-point scale is dumb. I finished with a 92, so that's a B in the 7-point scale. And I got the rest of my grades back, and I had A's in all my other classes. And I was 1 point short from finishing with all A's for like the first time since 3rd grade. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. I remember thinking, man, I could have made my mama proud. Send me a little, send her a little, screenshot of it. But here's the thing. I decided to coast before, the semester was finished. I didn't finish strong. Decided to coast, and as a result, missed out on the opportunity to get all A's. Here's the thing, students. I want you to be honest with you. Right, I've been following the BSM from afar, and God is doing some crazy stuff. I heard, just heard a testimony. It's been neat to see how much God is moving and is changing lives. Right, it's neat to see how God is using you, right, to reach this campus for Jesus. But listen, the work isn't finished yet. The work isn't finished yet. Don't quit. Keep going until the work is finished, right? You still have until May, until the semester's over. Paul puts it this way, hey, look, make the most of every opportunity, for the days are evil. Make the most of the time that you have left here at UTA. Nehemiah chapter 6. Talks about a great story of a man that found himself in that same spot. This dude named Nehemiah. Here in the text, he was living away from his homeland, and God had called him to go back to his homeland and rebuild the walls that had been broken because of war and ruin in that place. And so he decides to go back, and it's a big work. He's got a lot of folks that are working together. God's in it, right? And they're almost finished. Almost finished. And that's where we find ourselves in chapter 6. Look what it says. When Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and that there was no gap left in it, though at the time I had not installed all the doors in the city gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent the message, "Come, let us meet together in the villages of the Ono Valley." They were planning to harm me. Throughout the whole book of Nehemiah, we see that there are these three goons, that there are these three dummies, if you will. I guess that's a censored version, of who these folks were. These three guys that did not like what Nehemiah and the people of Israel were doing, going back and rebuilding these walls. And throughout their entire time of them building, they were attacking them, verbally abusing them, assaulting them. And they decided, hey, we're going to give it one last effort to get these guys to stop doing the work that God had called them to do. Keep going, verse 3. So I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing an important work and cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same proposal, and I gave them the same reply. Sanballat sent me this same message a 5th time by his aide, who had an open letter in his hand, and in it was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Geshem agrees that you and the Jews plan to rebel. This is the reason you are building this wall. According to the reports, you have become their king and have even set up the prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim on your behalf, there is a king in Judah. These rumors will be heard by the king. So come, let's confer together." Now these guys are spreading rumors which could ultimately lead to the death of Nehemiah. Right, doing everything they can to get him to not finish the work that God had called him to do. But verse 8 says this, "Then I replied to him, there is nothing to these rumors you are spreading. You are inventing them in your own mind. For they were all trying to intimidate us, saying they will drop their hands from the work, and it will never be finished. But now, my God, strengthen my hands." Hey, listen, students, don't quit. Keep going until the work is done. Listen, you've got a month left. Keep going until the work is finished. We see 3 simple truths, and then I'm done, from this that we can take from this text regarding this call for us to continue pressing forward until our work is finished. The first one is this: hey, keep going in spite of opposition. Listen, keep going in spite of opposition. We see that Nehemiah decided to do that. You've got these folks that are looking they're physically, wanting to abuse him. They're verbally assaulting him, making fun of him all throughout the book. And he says, no, I'm going to keep on going. Why? Because this is God's work. Listen, here's the truth right here for you guys to hang on to and write in your mind. Whenever the Spirit of God is at work in your life and in the life of the people that are around you, whenever he's moving, opposition is going to come. It's going to come. It's going to come. It's going to make you want to choose to quit. But listen, you got to make the choice to continue to keep going. And keep on serving. Keep on loving. Keep on sharing the gospel with that lost roommate. That lost sweetmate. That lost classmate. You've got to continue to keep going. In spite of opposition. We see 3 ways in which opposition took place here in the text. The first way was simply this. Right, opposition took place by way of persecution. We saw verbal persecution, but also they were wanting to physically beat them up. Listen, as you know, persecution, that can easily be a reality in the life of the Christian, of you and me in here. I remember one time in high school, I was sitting in my computer class, and there was a dude that was an atheist that was right next to me. I had this Jesus piece on, right? It was not a gold Jesus piece. I was not rich like that. It It was a beaded one, right? It had a little cross and then had the beads, the black bead representing sin, the red bead representing, the blood of Jesus, the, blue bead, baptism, all that. And I remember, the guy said, man, dude, that piece of jewelry is whack. And I was like, what you mean, man? It's the gospel. Let's talk about Jesus. What you talking about? He's like, no, that's why it's whack. It's because, it's talking about Jesus. I don't believe in him. And we had a good conversation after that. But listen, maybe you're in here and you've experienced, right, verbal persecution from going out and sharing the gospel. Or you've experienced verbal persecution and, looking to minister to that person, that co-worker or that roommate. Listen, don't quit because you've experienced that. Listen, the work of Jesus, that person hearing the gospel message, it's worth, right, someone saying something foul about you. Did you know that? It's worth it. Ask our friends to the east that are, experiencing physical persecution. They see the gospel of Jesus Christ and following him worth their entire life. They're willing to risk their whole life for it. And they're saying, hey, I'm going to continue to stand and follow him. Listen, keep going in spite of persecution. Secondly, we see temptation. Keep going in spite of temptation. Nehemiah was tempted on several occasions to jump off the wall and to quit the work, even though he was close to being finished. Right? He was tempted to choose to compromise, right, the conviction that he had from the Lord to do this work. Listen, don't quit because of temptation. Listen, student in here, right? God has used you in a mighty way. Listen, don't compromise your conviction, right? And compromise the call that God has given you for 20 minutes looking at that website that you're not supposed to be looking at. Listen, don't choose to compromise the call to share with that neighbor by choosing to engage in that activity you shouldn't be engaging in. Listen, the temptation, right? Succumbing to the temptation, it's not worth it. By the way, you know that in Jesus, right, we have the power to say no to temptation. Right? The good news is, but because of the completed work, the finished work of Jesus on the cross, right, that we're no longer slaves to sin. When temptation comes, we can say no and choose to follow him. And so choose to do that. Choose to do that. And thirdly, listen, keep going, right, in spite of the distractions that are found in your life. I'm going to go ahead and date myself. Whenever I started school here, it was fall 2010, I had the iPhone 1. The iPhone 1. I mean, I was behind. I usually, I got hand-me-downs. I think the iPhone 3 or the iPhone 4 was big during that time. But I had the iPhone 1, and it was terrible. I remember thinking it was awesome back then because, back in high school, I had like the little slider, the Raise, the flip phone. Y'all probably don't know what that is. Y'all just probably seen that in videos. But they were real. They were real. And there are folks in here that could probably say they had, like a house phone back then. Like that was. But I remember I had the iPhone 1 and literally, it had like 20 minutes of battery life, There was no surfing, no surfing your apps, right? There was no, getting on the internet. But I remember thinking, man, that was awesome. And since I always got stuff later than all my friends, I really treasured, whenever I actually got, new things. So whenever I got a new phone, man, I mean, my whole life was, basically me being involved in that phone. Right? And even now, I serve as a pastor at church. I mean, but my struggle is to, not get so caught up, right, in social media, in my phone, and, not let that distraction keep me from, walking in the calling that God has given me. And listen, that's the same call for us in here. Look, choose to remove the distractions that may keep you from finishing well this semester in school, but also in the ministry that God's called you to. And keep going. By the way, about cell phones, this is just for free. I'll add this in. Cell phones, social media, man, those are great servants, right? great to use, to build up and glorify God, but if you're not careful, they'll make cruel masters in your life. So choose to lay down the distractions and choose to keep going in the call that God has given you. Second truth we see, it's here in the text. Hey, keep going because you're doing a great work. Listen, keep going because you're doing great work. That's what Nehemiah says in verse 4. That word important there in my version, literally the word in the original language is gadol, meaning great. Right? It's an awesome work. Right? Let me paint the picture for you. Nehemiah, he wasn't a preacher. He wasn't, a deacon at a church. Right, he was a dude that worked as a taste tester for the king, essentially, and then was called to rebuild a wall. And he was doing a great work. And the reason why he considered it great work wasn't because he himself was doing it. It was because the God of the universe that spoke things into being, that knitted him in the womb of his mother, the God that it says, as it says in Colossians 1:17, that holds everything together. Right, he called him to be a part of that work. And listen, that's the same truth for us in here tonight. Right, the work that you're doing here at UTA, whether you're a door greeter outside, whether you're passing out, programs for the service tonight, whether you're a part of the evangelism team going out and sharing, listen, the work that you're doing is great because God has called you to it. So listen, don't quit. Keep going until your work is finished. It's a great work. Listen, you may not be called to be a preacher or a pastor or be called into ministry. Right? God may have you in a season of being a full-time student. Hey, listen, that call it's a great work. Right? And so step into what God has called you to. And keep going until the work is finished. It's a great work. And lastly, we see here in verse 9, I want to reread it. It says this, Nehemiah in the midst of all this, for they were all trying to intimidate us, saying they will drop their hands from the work and it will never be finished. But now, my God, strengthen my hands. After a while, Nehemiah got tired of, I can just envision it now. Imagine you being in Nehemiah's spot. He's been working on this, work that God has called him to do. He's been on it 50 or so days at this point. Right? He's been fighting these folks that have been attacking him. Right, this constant opposition. And he's at a point where he's tired. And he's at a point where he feels like he wants to quit. But that second part of verse 9, it says, hey, but God, strengthen my hands. Listen, the third truth is this. Keep going because help is available. Listen, Stu, you may find yourself in that same place. Mission trip was awesome. A lot of you went last couple of weeks. But this semester has been crazy for you. And you want to quit. Listen, help is available. Help is available. I remember my sophomore year here at UTA, I was taking college algebra, and I'm terrible at math. Terrible. And let's just say I started out of the gate miserably. I think I bombed my first two tests. And I'm thinking, man, I want to quit this thing. But here's the thing, I couldn't. I knew God was calling me to transfer to a different school, and I needed to pass that math class in order to, get the grade I needed to transfer. And so, I found myself in a last resort situation. Someone told me about this math lab, tutoring center that was available on campus, for me to go to. And I said, I heard it's free, so I ended up going. And I remember thinking, I get there and I'm looking, and the way that it's set up, they've got all these different choices of classes that you may be in that you may need help with, and they've got like trigonometry and calculus and engineering math classes. And here I am, I'm needing help in college algebra. I don't even think they had an option for college algebra because, to them it was so easy. I'm thinking, man, I'm looking like an idiot. I'm just going to get up and leave. It's terrible. But somebody finally came to help me. It took them like 2 minutes, to show me the problem, and I'm pretty sure they rolled their eyes and left, thinking, man, this guy's wasting my time. But I remember continuing to go because I saw that help was available, and I chose to accept that help, and that tutoring ended up helping me, and I ended up passing, my class, and transferring schools. Listen, I say all that to say, student, there comes a point in time in your life and my life, right? If we want to continue to keep moving forward in the work that God has called for you to do here and finish well, you're going to have to lay aside the pride, thinking that you don't need help. You're going to have to choose to go to the God that says in Psalm 27:1 is our light and our salvation, right? Our help. Our strength. We're going to have to choose to go to the God that it says in Psalm 121, right? The psalmist lifted his eyes up to the hills and he saw where his help came from. It came from the Lord. The one that's a refuge for us in times of trouble, Psalm 9:9. And choose to accept that help. Ask for God to strengthen our hands to finish the work that he's called for us to do. And that's what Nehemiah did. If you don't know the rest of the story, God did strengthen his hands. They did finish their work. They put the gate on there. The enemies, right here, the folks that opposed them, they moved on. And if you look at Nehemiah chapter 8 through the rest of the book, chapter 13, what happened next was awesome. Literally one of the biggest revivals in all of the Old Testament took place. God used that man Nehemiah, right, to go and rebuild a wall with some of his buddies. And he used Nehemiah's faithfulness to help spark one of the biggest revivals in all the Old Testament. Listen, keep going. I know it's tempting to just want to coast until the end of the semester. But students, keep going on the work that God's called for you to do here. Make the most of the time. There's still lost students that need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ and how God that made them loved them enough to send his son to die for them. There's still folks that are enslaved to sin that need to know that, hey, there's freedom that's found through the cross of Christ. So keep going. Keep going. I'm going to pray, and then the band's going to come up and sing a song for us. My open prayer is simply this, that, hey, you'd finish well. It's been neat to see what God has been doing here. But he's not done yet. And so my open prayer is that you choose to continue in the work that he's called for you to do.